Chapter 1. The forest wanted her dead. Ilara could feel it in the way the branches clawed at her skin, how the roots seemed to rise just when her foot came down, how the wind itself pushed against her like a living thing trying to slow her escape. Blood dripped from the gash above her eyebrow, warm and sticky, blurring her vision as she stumbled through the darkness between the trees. Run. Just run. Her lungs burned. Every breath tasted like copper and fear. Behind her, voices echoed through the woods, angry, hunting, relentless. The council's enforcers, they'd finally done it, finally decided she was too dangerous to let live. Find her. She can't have gone far! Ilara's heart slammed against her ribs. She pressed herself against the rough bark of an ancient oak, trying to quiet her ragged breathing, trying to become invisible. The mark on her left shoulder blade burned beneath her torn shirt. A silver crescent moon that had appeared 3 weeks ago, the same night everything fell apart. The same night they called her cursed. She'd lived her whole life as an Omega in the Shadowpine Pack, barely noticed, barely tolerated. She cleaned, she cooked. She kept her head down and her mouth shut. That was survival. That was safety. Until the mark appeared. Until her hands started glowing with that strange silver light whenever her emotions ran too high. Until the head elder looked at her with horror instead of indifference and whispered the word that changed everything. Abomination. A twig snapped somewhere to her left. Ilara's eyes flew open. She couldn't stay here, couldn't hide. They had trackers, wolves with senses far sharper than her weak, broken ones. She'd never been able to shift, never felt that primal pull the others described. Just another reason they'd always looked at her like she was less than nothing. But now they looked at her like she was a threat. She pushed off the tree and ran again, her bare feet slipping on wet leaves. When had it started raining? She hadn't even noticed. The storm had rolled in fast, swallowing the moonlight, turning the forest into a maze of shadows and silver rain. Her body screamed at her to stop. The cut on her side, courtesy of Elder Marin's blade, throbbed with every step. She could feel the warmth of her own blood soaking through her shirt, could feel her strength draining away with it. How far can you run before you fall? The thought whispered through her mind in a voice that didn't quite sound like her own. Darker, older, powerful. She ignored it. She'd been hearing that voice more and more lately, especially when the mark burned hot and her hands started to glow. She didn't know what it meant, didn't want to know. She just wanted to survive. The ground suddenly gave way beneath her. Ilara gasped as she tumbled down a steep embankment, her body slamming against rocks and roots, pain exploding everywhere. She hit the bottom hard, the air knocked from her lungs, stars bursting behind her eyes. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Could only lie there in the mud and rain, wondering if this was it, if this was how her miserable, broken life would end. Get up. That voice again, commanding, urgent, get up. Ilara's fingers dug into the wet earth. Every muscle screamed in protest, but she pushed herself to her hands and knees, then to her feet. She swayed, dizzy, her vision swimming. The voices were closer now, much closer. She went this way. I can smell her blood. Panic surged through her chest, cold and sharp. She limped forward, not even sure which direction she was going anymore, just knowing she had to move, had to keep moving. The trees began to thin. Through the rain and darkness, she could see a clearing ahead, and beyond it, the jagged silhouette of the mountain range that marked the border of Shadowpine territory. The forbidden peaks. No wolf crossed those mountains. The stories said ancient magic lived in those rocks, that things older and more dangerous than any pack prowled those heights. Anyone foolish enough to venture there never came back. But what choice did she have? Behind her, certain death. Ahead, possible death. She'd take possible over certain any day. Ilara broke through the tree line and into the clearing, rain lashing at her face. The mark on her shoulder burned so hot now it felt like someone was pressing a brand into her skin. Her hands began to glow, that eerie silver light seeping through her fingertips, brighter than she'd ever seen it. There! There she is! She didn't look back. She ran for the mountains, every step agony, that strange light growing brighter around her hands, her whole body beginning to hum with energy she didn't understand. The enforcers burst into the clearing behind her. "Stop! By order of the council, stop!" Ilara's foot hit the first rock of the mountain path. The moment she crossed that invisible border, everything changed. The air itself seemed to shift, growing heavier, crackling with power. The rain stopped, not gradually, but all at once. As if someone had thrown a switch. The mark on her shoulder flared so bright it hurt, and the silver light around her hands exploded outward in a pulse that lit up the entire clearing. The enforcers skidded to a halt at the edge of the tree line, their eyes wide with shock and fear. They wouldn't follow her here. They were too afraid. Ilara stood there, swaying, bleeding, glowing like some kind of ghost, and watched them back away. Watched them turn and disappear into the trees. She'd escaped. She was free. She was alone. And as the adrenaline finally began to drain from her body, as the pain and exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, Ilara's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the rocky ground, her vision going dark at the edges. That strange voice whispering one last time before consciousness slipped away. "You are not alone. He is coming." Before we continue, dear viewer, if this story has already grabbed hold of something inside you, if you can feel Ilara's fear and desperation, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Join us here, because we're just getting started. This girl's journey? The Alpha King who's about to find her broken and bleeding on his mountain? You won't want to miss what happens next. Trust me. Chapter 2. Pain was the first thing that dragged Ilara back to consciousness. Sharp, throbbing, everywhere. The second thing was warmth. She was wrapped in something soft, furs, she realized, and beneath her was something that wasn't cold, wet stone. A bed. How was she in a bed? Her eyes flew open, stone ceiling, firelight dancing across rough walls, the scent of burning wood and something else, something wild and masculine that made her wolf instinct stir even though she'd never been able to shift. Where was she? Ilara tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Her body screamed in protest, the wound in her side pulling tight. She gasped, falling back against the pillows. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The voice came from the shadows near the fire, deep, rough, edged with something that sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. Well, maybe a little fear. A figure stepped into the light, and Ilara's breath caught in her throat. He was massive, easily 6'4", with shoulders that seemed to fill the entire space, his presence so overwhelming it felt like the air itself bent around him. Dark hair fell just past his collar, slightly damp as if he'd recently been out in the rain. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, strong jaw, high cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. But it was his eyes that held her frozen, golden. Not brown, not amber, pure molten gold glowing slightly in the firelight, watching her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. This wasn't just any wolf, this was an alpha, and not just any alpha. The power radiating off him was unlike anything she'd ever felt, ancient, overwhelming, barely contained beneath that human skin. "Who are you?" Ilara's voice came out rough, her throat dry. He moved closer and she instinctively pressed back against the headboard. He noticed. Something flickered across his face, not quite hurt, but close. "Easy," he said, his voice gentling slightly. "I'm not going to harm you, Ilara." Her blood went cold. "How do you know my name?" He stopped a few feet from the bed, tilting his head as if studying her. "I know a lot of things about you. The girl with the silver mark, the Omega who glows in the dark, the one Shadowpine cast out because they feared what they couldn't control. Alara's hand instinctively went to her shoulder, where the mark still burned beneath the clean bandage someone had wrapped around her torso. "You've been watching me." "Protecting you," he corrected. "There's a difference." "That sounds like something a stalker would say." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. Fair enough. "But if I wanted to hurt you, little wolf, you'd already be dead. Instead, I found you bleeding out on my mountain, brought you to my home, cleaned and bandaged your wounds, and kept you alive through the night." My mountain. The words settled over her like a weight. "The Forbidden Peaks," she whispered. "You live here. I rule here." He moved to the fire, adding another log, the muscles in his back shifting beneath his dark shirt. "These mountains belong to me. Have for the last 150 years. Alara's mind reeled. 150 years. That meant he was ancient bloodline, he said, as if reading her thoughts. He turned back to face her, the firelight casting half his face in shadow. "My name is Kale Stormborn, and yes, before you ask, I'm the one they tell stories about. The Alpha King of the Northern Wilds, the monster who rules the Forbidden Peaks." She'd heard the stories. Every wolf had. The Alpha King, who'd been banished generations ago for being too powerful, too dangerous, who'd retreated to these mountains and built his own kingdom away from the pack politics and council laws that governed the rest of their world. They said he was ruthless, merciless, that he commanded not just wolves, but the very elements themselves. They said he was more beast than man. But looking at him now, at the careful way he'd bandaged her wounds, at the wariness in his eyes as if he expected her to fear him, Alara wasn't sure what to believe. "Why?" The word came out barely above a whisper. "Why would you help me?" Kale was quiet for a long moment, those golden eyes searching her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost reluctant. "Because I've been waiting for you." The air between them seemed to crackle with tension. "That's impossible. You don't even know me." "Don't I?" He moved closer again, and this time Alara didn't shrink back. Couldn't. She was caught in the gravity of him, in the way he looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. "I know you hear a voice that isn't yours. I know your hands glow silver when your emotions run high. I know you have a mark on your shoulder blade that burns like fire." He stopped at the edge of the bed, so close now she could feel the heat radiating off him. "I know," he continued, his voice dropping to something that felt almost intimate, "that 3 weeks ago, something inside you woke up, something that's been sleeping your entire life, something that terrified your pack so much they tried to kill you rather than face the truth." Alara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What truth?" Kale's eyes seemed to glow brighter, and when he spoke, his words changed everything. "That you were never an Omega, Alara. You were never weak. You were dormant, waiting. And now that you've awakened." He paused, something dangerous and possessive flickering across his face. "Now everything changes." She should be afraid, should be demanding answers, demanding he let her go. But instead, all she could think was that this stranger, this powerful, terrifying Alpha King, was looking at her the way no one ever had in her entire life. Like she mattered, like she was important, like she was seen. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will." Kale straightened, putting distance between them again, and Alara hated the way her body immediately mourned the loss of his nearness. "Rest. Heal. When you're stronger, I'll explain everything. The mark, the power. Why Shadowpine was so afraid of you." He moved toward the door. "Kyle." His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. He stopped, looking back over his shoulder. "Why were you waiting for me?" For the first time, something that might have been pain crossed his features. Because 200 years ago, a prophecy was spoken, and you, little wolf with the silver flame. He met her eyes, and the weight of his gaze nearly crushed her. You're the one it was about. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Alara alone with the fire and the furs and the terrifying knowledge that her life, the small, broken, invisible life she'd known, was never coming back. She wasn't that girl anymore. She didn't know who she was becoming. But as the mark on her shoulder pulsed with warmth, as that ancient voice whispered through her mind again, finally, you've found him. Alara had the sinking feeling that she was about to find out, whether she was ready or not. Chapter 3. Alara didn't sleep after Kyle left. How could she? She lay there in the firelight staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with everything he'd said. Prophecy, dormant, silver flame, words that should have sounded like madness but instead resonated somewhere deep in her bones, in that place where the voice lived, the voice that had been getting louder every day since the mark appeared. Her fingers traced the edge of the bandage wrapped around her torso. Beneath it, she could feel the mark on her shoulder blade, still warm, still pulsing with that strange energy that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. You were never an Omega. Kyle's words echoed through her mind, and something inside her chest cracked open. Something she'd kept locked away for 23 years. Hope? No, she couldn't afford hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. Alara had learned that lesson early. She'd been 5 years old the first time she realized she was different. It was the night of the pack's monthly gathering, when all the children were supposed to shift for the first time under the full moon. She remembered standing in the clearing with the other pups, remembered the excitement thrumming through her small body, remembered thinking finally, I'll belong. She'd closed her eyes, reached for that primal part of herself everyone talked about, waited for the shift to take her. Nothing happened. Around her, bones cracked and reformed. Fur sprouted. Children became wolves, their joyful howls filling the night air. Alara remained human, small, vulnerable, broken. Her mother's face when she'd opened her eyes, she'd never forget that look. Disappointment, shame, fear of what the pack would say, what they would think. Try again, her mother had hissed. Concentrate harder. She'd tried. Gods, she'd tried until tears streamed down her face, until her whole body shook with effort. Nothing. The other parents had started to notice, started whispering. The alpha had approached. Not the current alpha, but his father, a cruel man with dead eyes and a quick temper. Defective, he'd pronounced, the word falling like a death sentence. The girl is defective. Her mother hadn't argued, hadn't defended her, had simply bowed her head and accepted the judgment, accepted the new reality. Her daughter was Omega, less than, weak. From that night on, Alara had been invisible. No, worse than invisible. She'd been a reminder of everything the pack feared: weakness, failure, imperfection. The years that followed blurred together into a monotonous cycle of survival. She'd learned to make herself small, to speak softly, to keep her eyes down and her opinions to herself. She'd learned which pack members would tolerate her presence and which would go out of their way to make her life hell. Bobby had been the worst, the alpha's son, all arrogance and cruelty, who seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding her of her place. He'd trip her when she carried food to the gathering hall, knock books from her hands, whisper vicious things as she passed. Broken little Omega, what's the point of you? Can't shift, can't fight, can't even breed strong pups. Should have left you in the woods when you were born. She'd endured it. All of it. Because what choice did she have? Her mother had died when she was 16. A hunting accident, they'd said, though Alara had always wondered. wondered if maybe her mother had simply gotten tired of carrying the shame of having a defective daughter. After that, Ilara had truly been alone. She'd moved into the Omega Barracks, a drafty building on the edge of pack territory, where they housed the servants and the broken. She'd worked in the kitchens, cleaned the Alpha's house, mended clothes until her fingers bled. She'd survived, but she'd never lived, not until 3 weeks ago. The memory was still vivid, still burned into her mind like a brand. She'd been in the forest, gathering herbs for the pack healer. It was late, later than she should have been out, but she'd needed the solitude, needed the quiet away from the constant reminder of what she wasn't. The moon had been full that night, massive and silver and so bright it turned the whole forest into something otherworldly. She'd stopped in a clearing, just to breathe, just to exist for a moment without someone telling her she was doing it wrong. And then the pain had hit. Searing, agonizing pain that dropped her to her knees. Her shoulder blade felt like it was on fire, like someone was carving into her skin with a white-hot blade. She'd screamed, couldn't help it. The pain was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. When it finally faded, when she could finally breathe again, she'd reach back to touch her shoulder. The mark had been there. The silver crescent moon glowing faintly in the darkness, still warm to the touch. And the voice had spoken for the first time. "Wake up. It's time to wake up." She'd stumbled back to the barracks in a daze, hidden the mark beneath her clothes, tried to pretend nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Her hands had started glowing 2 days later, just a faint shimmer at first, easy to hide. But it grew stronger, harder to control, especially when her emotions ran high. When Bobby had cornered her in the storage room, his hands rough and his intentions clear, the silver light had exploded from her palms and thrown him across the room. She'd run, left him unconscious, hoped he wouldn't remember. But he'd remembered. And he'd told the Alpha, and the Alpha had told the Council. Within a week they'd called her before them, the elders with their ancient eyes and their fear of anything they couldn't control. Elder Marin had taken one look at the mark and gone pale. "The prophecy, child," she'd whispered. "After all these years, it's impossible." "What's impossible?" Ilara had asked. Her voice shaking, but they wouldn't explain, wouldn't answer her questions. They'd just looked at her with horror and fear, like she'd become something monstrous overnight. "She's too dangerous," one of them had said. "The power will consume her. Consume all of us. We should kill her now before she fully awakens." "She's already awakening. Look at the mark. Look at her hands. We're too late to stop it." "Then we banish her. Send her beyond the borders and let the wilderness take her. If she survives, if she fully transforms, she won't survive. The girl can't even shift. She's weak. The mountains will kill her before her power manifests." They decided her fate like she wasn't even there, like she was a problem to be solved, not a person. Elder Marin had been the one to cut her, to draw first blood and mark her for exile. "Run," the old woman had whispered as Ilara stumbled away, bleeding. "Run and don't look back. They'll hunt you. They'll kill you. Your only chance is the Forbidden Peaks. If the stories are true, if he's still there." She'd never finished the sentence. The other enforcers had arrived and Ilara had run. Now, lying in Kale's bed, wrapped in his furs, breathing in his scent, Ilara finally let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The grief, the rage, the bone-deep loneliness of being unwanted her entire life. The tears came hot and fast, soaking into the pillow. She didn't make a sound, years of training herself to cry silently, but her body shook with the force of it. She'd survived. She'd escaped. But at what cost? She'd lost everything. Her pack, her home, her identity, as small and painful as it had been. And now this Alpha King, this stranger with golden eyes and impossible claims, was telling her she was part of some prophecy, that she was important, powerful. How was she supposed to believe that? How was she supposed to be anything but the broken Omega she'd always been? The door opened softly. Alara quickly wiped at her tears, tried to compose herself, but she knew it was too late. He'd heard her. Of course he had. Alpha senses. Kale stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. In his hands was a tray, tea, and what looked like bread and honey. "I thought you might be hungry," he said quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He set the tray on the table beside the bed, then did something unexpected. He sat down on the edge of the bed, careful to keep distance between them, and when he spoke, his voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. "They were wrong about you, Alara. Everyone who ever made you feel small, whoever called you weak or broken or defective, they were wrong." "How do you know?" The question came out raw, desperate. "You don't know me. You don't know what I am." His golden eyes met hers, and the intensity there stole her breath. "I know," he said softly, "because I see you, all of you. The power you're trying to hide, the strength you don't even know you have. And I know because the mark on your shoulder, I have its match." He turned, pulling down the collar of his shirt to reveal his own shoulder blade. There, glowing faintly in the firelight, was a silver crescent moon, identical to hers. "We're bound, little wolf. Have been since the moment you were born, and everything that's happening to you, the voice, the power, the mark, it's not a curse." He looked back at her, and something in his expression made her heart stutter. "It's destiny." Chapter 4. Alara stared at the mark on Kyle's shoulder, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. Identical. The crescent moons were identical. That's impossible," she breathed. Kale pulled his shirt back up and turned to face her fully. "Is it? Is it really more impossible than everything else that's happened to you in the last 3 weeks?" He had a point. "I don't understand any of this." Alara's hand went to her own mark, feeling the warmth of it through the bandage. "What does it mean? Why do we both have it?" "Eat first," Kale said, nodding toward the tray. "Then I'll show you something. Something that might help you understand." Alara wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers immediately, but her stomach chose that moment to growl loudly. She flushed with embarrassment, but Kale just pushed the tray closer with an expression that might have been amusement. "Eat," he repeated. "You've been unconscious for almost a full day. Your body needs fuel." She ate. The bread was warm and fresh, the honey sweet and golden. The tea was some kind of herbal blend that tasted of mint and something else, something that made the constant ache in her body ease slightly. Kyle watched her the entire time, those golden eyes never leaving her face. It should have made her uncomfortable, should have made her feel exposed. Instead, it made her feel seen, safe almost, which was ridiculous. She barely knew him. And yet, when she'd finished, Kale stood and offered his hand. "Can you walk?" Alara hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, energy sparked between them, silver light flickering across their joined hands before fading. Kale's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Just helped her to her feet with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his massive frame. She swayed slightly, and his other hand immediately went to her waist, steadying her. Even through her shirt, even through the bandages, his touch burned. "Easy," he murmured. "I've got you." And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. He led her through his home. And it was a home, not just a cave. Stone walls, yes, but carved with intricate designs, furs and tapestries that spoke of age and wealth, firelight from sconces that cast dancing shadows across everything. "You live here alone?" Alara asked as they moved through a corridor lined with what looked like ancient weapons. "Mostly. I have a few who've sworn themselves to my service. Wolves who were cast out by their packs, who had nowhere else to go." The The forbidden peaks have become a sanctuary of sorts for the unwanted. The unwanted, like her. They emerged into a larger chamber, and Alara's breath caught. It was a temple. There was no other word for it. The ceiling soared high above them, disappearing into shadow. Carved pillars rose from the floor, each one covered in symbols that seemed to glow faintly silver in the darkness. At the far end of the chamber stood an altar, ancient stone, worn smooth by time, covered in that same silvery light. But it was the walls that held her attention. Every surface was covered in carvings, images of wolves and moons and fire, scenes of battle and transformation, and everywhere, that crescent moon symbol. "What is this place?" Alara whispered, her voice echoing in the vast space. "The Temple of the First Moon," Kale said quietly, "built by the original wolves, before the packs divided, before the councils formed. This was where they came to commune with the ancient power that created our kind." He guided her closer to the altar, and as they approached, the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, responding to their presence. No, not their presence. Her presence. The mark on Alara's shoulder burned hot, and her hands began to glow with that silver light. The entire temple seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Kale, what's happening?" "The temple recognizes you," he said, and there was something like awe in his voice. "It's been dormant for 200 years. Nothing I've done has ever awakened it like this." He led her to the altar where a stone tablet lay, its surface covered in carved text. The moment Alara's glowing hands touched the stone, the words began to shimmer, rearranging themselves into language she could read. When the silver moon marks the forsaken child, when power sleeps in one deemed mild, when shadow threatens to consume the light, the flame-bearer shall rise to fight, born of rejection. Forged in pain, she'll bring the scattered packs to reign bound to the king who guards the gate. Together they'll challenge ancient fate, but beware the choice when power wakes, for love and duty both have stakes. She who bears the silver flame must choose, salvation or the world in flame. Alara's legs went weak. Kale's arm immediately tightened around her waist, holding her upright. "The flame-bearer," she whispered. That's supposed to be me." "You bear the mark. Your hands glow with silver fire. The temple awakens at your touch." Kale turned her to face him, his expression intense. "Yes, Alara, the prophecy speaks of you. But I'm nobody. I'm just—" "Stop." His voice was sharp, cutting through her spiral. "Stop calling yourself nobody. Stop diminishing what you are. Your old pack was terrified of you because somewhere deep down, they knew what you could become." "And what's that?" Alara asked, her voice breaking. "What am I supposed to become?" Kale's golden eyes blazed in the silvery light. "The most powerful wolf our kind has seen in 1,000 years. The one who can unite the packs. The one who can save us all from what's coming." "What's coming?" Before Kale could answer, a tremor ran through the temple. The silvery light flickered, and for just a moment the carvings on the walls shifted, showing different images. Darkness, shadow beasts with red eyes, wolves falling, blood on snow, an eclipse swallowing the moon. Alara gasped, and the images disappeared as quickly as they'd come. "There's an ancient enemy," Kyle said quietly, his face grim. "Something that was sealed away long ago, before even my time. The original wolves sacrificed everything to imprison it. But seals don't last forever, Alara. For the last decade, I've felt it weakening, felt something dark stirring in the deep places of the world." He looked down at her, and she saw fear there, actual fear in the eyes of the most powerful alpha she'd ever met. "The prophecy says, when the flame-bearer awakens, it's because the seal is breaking, because the shadow is rising. And you—" He touched her cheek gently, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. You're the only one who can stop it." "I don't know how to stop anything," Alara said desperately. "I can't even shift. I can't control this power. I don't know what I'm doing." "I know." Kale's voice softened. "That's why I'm here. That's what the prophecy means when it says you're bound to the king who guards the gate. I'm supposed to help you, train you, prepare you. For what? For war, little wolf, for the battle that's coming, for the moment when you'll have to choose between the world and—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "And what?" He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. The prophecy's last line. "She who bears the silver flame must choose salvation or the world in flame. It means your power comes with a price, that awakening it fully, becoming what you're meant to be. It could save everyone, or it could destroy everything." The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. Alara looked around the temple, at the glowing symbols, at the altar pulsing with ancient power, at the mark on her shoulder that tied her to all of this. She thought about her life, about 23 years of being told she was worthless, broken, weak, about being invisible and unwanted and cast aside, and now she was supposed to be a savior? A weapon against some ancient darkness? It was too much, too big, too impossible. "I can't do this," she whispered. "You can." Kale's hands cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. "I know you're scared. I know this is overwhelming. But Alara, you survived your pack's rejection. You survived exile. You survived bleeding out on a mountain in a storm. You're stronger than you know." "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail?" Something shifted in his expression, something fierce and protective and possessive all at once. "Then we fail together, because I'm not letting you face this alone. The prophecy bound us for a reason. Where you go, I go. Your fight is my fight." "Why?" the question burst from her. "Why would you tie yourself to me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Kale's thumb traced her cheekbone, and the tenderness of the gesture made her chest ache. "Because 200 years ago, I was standing in this temple when a seer spoke the prophecy, and she looked right at me and said, 'The one you're waiting for will be worth the wait. She'll be broken and beautiful and brave, and she'll save you as much as you save her.'" His golden eyes held hers, and Alara couldn't breathe. "I've been alone for 2 centuries, Alara, waiting, watching, knowing that somewhere out there, my match existed, the one person in the world whose soul was tied to mine. And then 3 weeks ago, I felt it. Felt the moment your mark appeared, felt your power wake up, felt the bond snap into place." "Bond?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mate bond," Kale said softly, and the word hung in the air between them like a prayer. "You're my mate, Alara, my fated mate. The prophecy didn't just bind us in destiny, it bound us in every way that matters." The temple seemed to pulse with approval, the silver light growing brighter, warmer, wrapping around them both like a blessing. Ilara's world tilted on its axis. Mate. He was claiming she was his mate. And the terrifying thing, the absolutely impossible thing. Deep in her chest, in that place where the voice lived, something sang out in recognition. Yes, finally, home. I need... Alara couldn't form words, couldn't process this. "I know." Kale released her face but kept one hand on her waist, steadying her. "This is a lot. Take your time. Process it. But know this, little wolf, whether you accept the mate bond or not, whether you choose to embrace your power or not, I'm not going anywhere. You're under my protection now, and I protect what's mine. What's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her, should have made her recoil. Instead, it made her feel safe for the first time in her entire life. Chapter 5. They didn't make it back to Kale's chamber before the attack came. Alara was still reeling from everything, the prophecy, the temple, the word mate echoing through her mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing, when Kale suddenly went rigid beside her. His head snapped toward the entrance, his entire body shifting into a predatory stance that made her breath catch. "Kale, stay behind me." His voice had changed, dropped into something primal and commanding that made her wolf instincts she'd never even known she had, immediately obey. She pressed herself against his back just as the first howl split the night air. Not one howl, multiple. A hunting party. "They found you," Kyle said grimly, already moving toward the temple entrance, pulling her with him. "Your pack. They followed your scent to the mountain border." Alara's heart stopped. "The enforcers?" "Worse." Kale's jaw clenched. "I smell your alpha. He came himself." Alpha Blackwood, Bobby's father, the cruelest wolf she'd ever known. They emerged from the temple into the night, and Alara immediately saw them. At least 20 wolves, all in their shifted forms, standing at the invisible border where pack territory ended and Coil's domain began. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, amber and gold and green, all fixed on her with hatred and fear. At the front of the group stood a massive black wolf, easily twice the size of the others, Alpha Blackwood. Even in wolf form, his presence was oppressive, suffocating. He shifted back to human, standing naked and unashamed in the moonlight, his scarred chest heaving with barely contained rage. "There she is," he snarled, pointing at Alara, "the abomination, hiding behind the mountain king like the coward she is." Kale moved in front of her, blocking Blackwood's line of sight. When he spoke, his voice carried across the distance with the weight of absolute authority. "You're on the border of my territory, Blackwood. State your business or leave." "My business is the girl." Blackwood's lip curled. "She belongs to Shadowpine Pack. We have the right to dispense justice for her crimes." "What crimes?" Kale's voice was deceptively calm, but Alara could feel the fury radiating off him in waves. "Being born different? Surviving your attempt to murder her?" "She attacked my son, used forbidden magic against pack members. The council declared her exile wasn't enough. She must face execution." Alara's blood ran cold. Execution. They weren't here to drive her away. They were here to kill her. "Your son," Kale said softly, dangerously, tried to force himself on her. She defended herself. That's not a crime. That's survival. How did he know that? Alara hadn't told him about Bobby cornering her. Hadn't told him what had triggered the silver light. But Kale knew. Somehow, he knew. Another wolf shifted. Bobby himself, his handsome face twisted with malice as he stepped forward beside his father. "She's lying. She attacked me unprovoked. She's dangerous, unstable. The mark proves it." "The mark," Kale said, his voice dropping to something that made even the seasoned warriors behind Blackwood flinch, "proves she's worth more than your entire pack combined, and you're too ignorant and afraid to see it." Blackwood's eyes flashed. "Careful, Stormborn. You may rule these mountains, but you have no authority over pack law. The girl is ours. We demand you release her to our custody." "No." The single word rang out with such finality, such absolute power that several of the wolves behind Blackwood whimpered and backed up a step. "She's under my protection," Kale continued. "She's claimed sanctuary in my territory. By ancient law, the laws that predate your precious councils, I have every right to grant it, and I do." "Ancient law means nothing," Blackwood roared. "The packs don't recognize your authority. You were banished, exiled, cast out just like her. You're nothing but a relic hiding in these mountains, pretending to be important." Kale smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Shall I remind you why I was exiled, Blackwood? Shall I demonstrate exactly why your ancestors decided it was safer to banish me than to face me?" The temperature dropped. Alara could see her breath misting in the air. Around Kale, the very atmosphere began to darken, shadows gathering at his feet, his eyes blazing pure, molten gold. This was power, true, ancient, terrifying power, and it was barely contained beneath his skin. The wolves behind Blackwood were openly backing away now, ears flat, tails tucked. Even Blackwood himself had gone pale, though he tried to hide it. "You wouldn't dare," the Alpha said, but his voice shook slightly. "Attack us, and you'll have every pack in the region calling for your head." "They already call for my head," Kale said calmly. "What's one more pack on the list? But you're right, I won't kill you, not unless you force my hand. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your wolves and leave. You're going to return to Shadowpine and tell your council that Alara is no longer their concern. She's mine now, under my protection, under my authority, and under my claim." The last word, claim, rang out with possessive finality. Bobby's eyes widened. "You can't claim her. She's an Omega. She's nothing." "She's my mate," Kale said, and chaos erupted. The wolves behind Blackwood began howling and snarling. Several shifted back to human form, shouting over each other. Bobby looked like he'd been slapped. And Alara couldn't breathe. He'd said it, in front of everyone, claimed her publicly as his mate. There was no taking that back, no pretending. It was a declaration, a line drawn in stone. Blackwood's face had gone from pale to purple with rage. "You can't mate an Omega. It's against... She's not an Omega." Kale's voice cracked like thunder across the mountain. "She never was. She's the flame bearer, the one from the prophecy. And whether you accept it or not, whether you like it or not, she outranks every single one of you, including you, Blackwood." "Lies!" Bobby shouted. "The prophecy is just a story. She's defective, broken. She can't even shift." Something inside Alara snapped. Maybe it was being called defective one too many times. Maybe it was the way they talked about her like she wasn't standing right there. Maybe it was the silver mark burning hot enough to brand her from the inside out. Or maybe it was the voice in her head suddenly roaring to life. Enough! Power surged through her veins like liquid fire. Alara stepped out from behind Kyle, ignoring his sharp inhale of surprise. Her hands were already glowing, brighter than they'd ever been. The mark on her shoulder blazed so hot it burned through her shirt, silver light streaming from it like moonbeams. "You want to know if I can shift?" Her voice didn't sound like her own. It was layered, echoing, ancient. "You want to see the proof?" "Alara, wait." Kale reached for her, but she was beyond stopping. The power exploded outward from her core. Pain, blinding, searing pain as her body began to change, but not like the other wolves. This was different. This was more. Her bones didn't just crack and reform, they sang. Silver light poured from her skin, wrapping around her like a cocoon. She heard herself scream, but it morphed into something else, a howl that shook the very mountains. And then she was shifting, but not into a wolf. Her form grew larger, more massive than any wolf had a right to be. Her fur came in pure white, shimmering like moonlight on snow, shot through with veins of silver that pulsed like living lightning. Her eyes blazed pure silver, no pupil, no iris, just power made visible. She was magnificent, terrifying, beautiful. She was everything they'd feared. The Shadowpine wolves scattered, several of them shifting in panic, others simply running in their human forms. Even Blackwood stumbled backward, his face pale with shock and fear. Only Bobby stood his ground, though Alara could see him trembling. This is impossible. Alara's massive wolf form took one step forward, and the ground beneath her paws cracked, silver light bleeding up through the stone. Not impossible, that ancient voice said, and Alara realized with shock that she could speak in this form, her voice carrying telepathically to every wolf present. Inevitable. "By the gods," someone whispered, "she's Jenda the Flame Bearer." Kale was suddenly beside her, his hand on her massive head, his presence grounding her before the power could spiral out of control. "Easy," he murmured, his voice for her alone. "You've made your point. Don't let it consume you." His touch was like ice water on burning skin. Elara gasped, and the power receded slightly. She could feel herself starting to shift back, her body shrinking, the silver light fading. The transformation back was just as painful, just as overwhelming. When it was done, she collapsed to her knees, naked and shaking, her skin still glowing faintly with residual power. Kale immediately wrapped his cloak around her, pulling her against his chest, his arms protective and possessive. "Now you've seen," he said to Blackwood, his voice deadly quiet. "Now you know what you tried to destroy. What you're lucky didn't unleash its full power on your pack when you hunted her like an animal." Blackwood couldn't speak. None of them could. They just stared at Elara with a mixture of awe and terror. "She's coming into her power," Kale continued, "and when she fully awakens, when she embraces what she is, she'll be the most powerful force our kind has ever known. You can either accept that and hope she shows you mercy when the time comes, or you can keep trying to destroy her and face the consequences." He pulled Elara to her feet, keeping her wrapped in his cloak, keeping her close. "The choice is yours. But if you come to my mountain again, if you threaten her again, if you even speak her name with anything but respect." His eyes flashed that terrifying gold. "I'll show you exactly why the old wolves feared me enough to exile me. And trust me, Blackwood, you don't want that." Silence stretched across the mountain. Finally, Blackwood found his voice. "The council will hear of this. They'll do nothing," Kale interrupted. "Because if they come for her, they come through me. And I've been waiting 200 years for a war worth fighting. Don't give me a reason." With that, he turned, sweeping Elara up into his arms as if she weighed nothing, and carried her back toward the temple. Behind them, Elara heard Bobby's voice, venomous and shaking. "This isn't over. She'll destroy you all. You'll see. The prophecy ends in fire for a reason." And as Kale carried her into the darkness, Elara couldn't help but wonder if Bobby was right. Chapter 6. Elara didn't remember Kale carrying her back to his chamber, didn't remember him laying her gently on the bed, pulling the furs up around her trembling body. She was lost somewhere inside herself, drowning in the aftermath of what she'd just done. She'd shifted. After 23 years of being told it was impossible, after a lifetime of being called defective and broken, she'd finally shifted, and it had been glorious, terrifying, overwhelming. Too much power, she thought distantly, too much for someone like me. "Stop." Kale's voice cut through her spiral. She opened her eyes to find him kneeling beside the bed, his golden eyes fixed on her face. "I can hear your thoughts spiraling. Stop doubting yourself." "I almost lost control," Elara whispered. "I could feel it. The power wanted more, wanted to keep going, but you didn't." His hand found hers beneath the furs, his fingers lacing through hers. "You pulled back. You controlled it. For your first shift, for your first real taste of your power, that's incredible." "I was terrified." "Good. You should be." He squeezed her hand gently. Power without fear is reckless. Fear without power is helpless. You need both to survive what's coming. Elara looked at their joined hands, at the way silver light flickered faintly between their skin, like their very souls were trying to reach for each other. "Why doesn't it scare you? This power, the prophecy, all of it." Kale was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, raw with emotion. "Because I've been alone for 200 years, Elara. 2 centuries of watching the world change, of watching everyone I ever cared about grow old and die while I remained. Do you know what that's like? To be immortal and utterly, completely alone? Her chest ached at the pain in his voice. Kale, when the seer spoke the prophecy, when she told me I'd have a mate someday, someone bound to my soul, it was the first hope I'd felt in decades, the first thing that made the endless years seem bearable. He looked up at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. So no, your power doesn't scare me. The prophecy doesn't scare me. What scares me is the thought of failing you, of not being strong enough to protect you from what's coming. Elara sat up slowly, letting the furs fall away. She was still wearing his cloak, wrapped around her like armor. You've already saved me. Multiple times. That's not enough. His jaw clenched. I need to train you, teach you to control your power before it consumes you. The shift tonight, that was just the beginning. You'll need to learn to shift at will, to channel the silver flame, to coil. She touched his face, stopping the flood of words. His skin was warm beneath her palm, rough with stubble, achingly real. Breathe. He did. Closed his eyes and took a shuddering breath, leaning into her touch like a man starved for affection. When he opened his eyes again, something had shifted in them, something softer, more vulnerable than she'd seen before. I don't know how to do this, he admitted quietly. I've been the Alpha King, the monster in the mountains, the exile everyone fears. I've forgotten how to be gentle, how to be someone's mate. Then we'll figure it out together. The words came out before she could stop them, but once they were spoken, Elara realized she meant them. Because I don't know how to do this either. I've never had anyone look at me the way you do, like I'm something precious, like I matter. You do matter. Kale's hands came up to cup her face, his touch reverent. You matter more than anything in this world. And I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I feel it too, Elara interrupted, her voice shaking. The bond. I don't understand it. Don't know how it's possible. But when you touch me, when you look at me, something inside me recognizes you. Like my soul has been waiting for yours. The temperature in the room seemed to rise. The air between them crackled with tension, not just attraction, though there was plenty of that, but something deeper, something primal and ancient and undeniable. Tell me something, Kale murmured, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. Something real, something no one else knows. Elara's throat tightened. Why? Because I want to know you, all of you, not just the flame bearer or the girl from the prophecy. I want to know Elara. No one had ever asked that before. No one had ever cared to know who she was beneath the surface. I used to hide in the forest, she said softly, when the pack got to be too much. When I couldn't stand being invisible anymore, I'd sneak away to this clearing by the river. There was an old oak tree and I'd climb up into the branches and just sit. Watch the water. Pretend I was somewhere else. Someone else. Kale listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face. I'd imagine I was important, that I mattered, that somewhere out there was a place I belonged, people who would see me and want me around. She laughed, but it came out broken. Stupid, right? All those years dreaming of being someone, and now that I apparently am someone, I have no idea what to do with it. It's not stupid. Kale's voice was fierce. And you do belong somewhere, here, with me. You barely know me. Then let me. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. Stay. Not because the prophecy says you have to. Not because you're afraid of what's out there. Stay because you want to. Let me know you. Let me teach you. Let me... He stopped, his jaw clenching as if he was holding back words. Let you what? Elara whispered. Let me love you. The confession came out raw, desperate. I know it's too soon. I know I sound insane. But Elara, I've been waiting 200 years for you. And now that you're here, now that I can touch you and see you and hear your voice, I don't want to waste another moment pretending I don't feel what I feel." Ilara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Kale." "You don't have to say it back." He pulled back slightly, giving her space. "I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking you to stay, to give us, a chance. Let me prove to you that you're worth everything I've waited for." She should say no, should tell him this was too much, too fast, too overwhelming. She'd just escaped one nightmare. Did she really want to walk into something else she didn't understand? But looking into his golden eyes, feeling the warmth of his touch, remembering how he'd stood between her and an entire pack without hesitation, this didn't feel like a nightmare. It felt like waking up. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of the power, of the prophecy, of this, whatever this is between us." "I know." Kale's smile was soft, understanding. "Be scared. Feel everything you need to feel, but don't run. Not yet. Give me a chance to show you that some things are worth being afraid for." Ilara thought about her life before, about being invisible and unwanted, about hiding in trees and pretending she mattered, and then she thought about shifting into that massive silver wolf, about the way the temple had awakened at her touch, about the way Kale looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Maybe she was still scared, but maybe, just maybe, she was also brave enough to try. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." The relief that washed over Kale's face was almost painful to witness. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, his face buried in her hair. "Thank you," he murmured against her temple. "Thank you." They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped around each other, the bond between them humming with contentment. Finally, Kale pulled back. "You should rest. Your body's been through trauma. The wounds, the shift, the power expenditure. You need sleep. Will you stay?" The question slipped out before Ilara could stop it. "I don't want to be alone." Something softened in his expression. "I'm not going anywhere." He moved to the other side of the bed, settling on top of the furs, keeping a respectful distance between them. But his hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. "Kale?" Ilara's voice was drowsy, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Tell me something real about you." She felt him shift beside her. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. "I was in love once, before I was exiled. Her name was Liana, and she was everything I thought I wanted. Beautiful, strong, from a powerful bloodline. We were going to mate, to rule together." Ilara's chest tightened with unexpected jealousy, but she stayed quiet, letting him continue. "When my power manifested fully, when the alphas realized how dangerous I'd become, she was the first to call for my exile. She stood before the council and told them I was too monstrous to lead, too unstable to love. She chose her position, her reputation, her comfort over me. I'm sorry," Ilara whispered. "Don't be." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "It taught me something important. That love built on appearances, on power, on what others think. That's not real love. Real love sees the monster and stays anyway, sees the scars and the darkness and the broken pieces and says, 'I choose you.'" He turned his head to look at her in the dim firelight. "You shifted tonight into something terrifying and beautiful. You could have destroyed them all." "And you know what my first thought was?" "What?" "That you were the most magnificent thing I'd ever seen. That I would follow you into any battle, face any enemy, burn down any world that tried to hurt you." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "That's how I knew. The bond isn't just magic or prophecy. It's recognition. My soul recognizing its match." Tears slipped down Ilara's cheeks. She'd spent her whole life believing she was unlovable, unwanted, broken beyond repair. And here was this ancient, powerful, impossible man telling her she was everything. "I see you too," she whispered. "The exile. The monster they call you. I see you, Kyle, and I'm not afraid." His hand tightened on hers. "You should be, at least a little. Maybe." She smiled despite her tears. "But I'm staying anyway." They fell asleep like that, hands joined, hearts beating in sync, the bond between them growing stronger with every breath. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the forbidden peaks. In the shadows beyond the mountain border, something ancient stirred. The prophecy had been set in motion, and there was no turning back now. Chapter 7. 3 days. 3 days of peace that felt like a lifetime. Kyle had been true to his word. He trained her every morning in the clearing behind the temple, teaching her to call the shift at will, to channel the silver flame through her hands without losing control. It was exhausting, painful work, her body still adjusting to the power that coursed through her veins, but she was getting stronger. And every evening, they'd sit by the fire in his chamber, talking, learning each other. He told her stories of the old world, of wolves who could speak to the earth itself, of magic that had been lost when the packs divided and forgot their roots. She told him about the small rebellions of her life, the books she'd stolen from the Alpha's library, the nights she'd climbed onto the roof just to feel closer to the moon, the secret hope she'd carried that maybe, someday, she'd matter. "You always mattered," Cale had said, his voice fierce. They were just too blind to see it. At night, they slept in the same bed, hands joined, the bond between them growing deeper. He never pushed for more, never demanded anything she wasn't ready to give. Just held her like she was precious. For the first time in her life, Alara felt safe. She should have known it wouldn't last. The messenger arrived at dawn on the 4th day. Alara was in the training clearing, practicing her shift when she felt Cale's presence change, felt his body go rigid with tension. She shifted back to human, pulling on the simple dress he'd given her, and turned to find him staring at a young wolf who'd emerged from the forest path, not one of his people. This wolf wore the colors of the Northern Council, the governing body that oversaw all the packs in their region. "Alpha King Stormborn," the messenger said, bowing his head in respect. "The council requests your presence. They wish to discuss the matter of the girl." Alara's blood went cold. "They know I'm here." Of course they know. Cale's voice was hard, his eyes never leaving the messenger. "Blackwood ran straight to them the moment he left my mountain. Tell the council I decline their invitation." "They anticipated you might say that." The messenger reached into his pack and pulled out a sealed scroll. "They asked me to deliver this." Kyle took the scroll, his jaw clenched. The moment he broke the seal and began reading, Alara saw his expression shift from anger to something darker, something that looked almost like fear. "What does it say?" she asked quietly. Cale's hands crushed the edges of the parchment. "They're calling for a grand gathering, forcing it actually, using ancient rites I can't refuse. Every alpha in the region, every elder, every council member. They want to determine what should be done about you." "What should be done about me?" Alara repeated, her voice shaking. "Like I'm a problem to be solved?" "They're afraid." Cale's eyes finally met hers, and she saw fury there, helpless fury. "The story of your shift has spread. They know what you are now, know about the prophecy, and they're terrified of what it means." The messenger cleared his throat. "The gathering is tonight, at the sacred grove. The council expects both of you to attend. If I refuse, they'll declare me in violation of the old laws and strip me of my territory rights." Cale finished bitterly. "I know how this works." "We don't have to go," Alara said quickly. "We can leave. Go somewhere they can't find us." "They'll find us." Kale's voice was defeated in a way she'd never heard before. "And running makes you look guilty. Makes it look like you're the threat they think you are." He turned to the messenger. "Tell them we'll be there." The young wolf bowed and disappeared back into the forest. The moment he was gone, Kyle pulled Alara into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I won't let them hurt you," he murmured against her hair. "I swear it. Whatever happens tonight, I'll protect you." But even as he said it, Alara could hear the doubt in his voice, could feel his fear bleeding through the bond. The sacred grove was exactly what its name suggested, a massive clearing deep in neutral territory, surrounded by ancient trees whose roots ran so deep they were said to touch the heart of the world itself. Torches burned in a circle around the clearing, casting dancing shadows across the faces of what had to be 100 wolves or more. Every alpha in the region, every elder, council members in their ceremonial robes, and behind them, witnesses from every pack, all gathered to judge her. Alara felt their eyes on her as Kyle led her into the center of the circle, felt their fear and hatred and curiosity burning into her skin. She wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to be invisible again. But Kale's hand was firm in hers, grounding her. "You're not alone," his voice whispered through the bond. "I'm right here." The head elder stepped forward, an ancient woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen centuries pass. Elder Moira. Kale had warned her about this one, fair but inflexible, a wolf who valued tradition and law above all else. "We are gathered," Moira's voice rang out across the clearing, "to address a matter of grave importance. 3 days ago, a wolf long believed to be Omega manifested abilities that suggest she is the one spoken of in ancient prophecy, the Flame Bearer." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Furthermore," Moira continued, "Alpha King Stormborn has claimed this wolf as his mate and taken her under his protection. The council must now determine, is this girl the savior spoken of in prophecy, or is she the destruction?" "She's destruction!" The shout came from the crowd. Bobby, of course, his face twisted with malice. "She attacked me, used forbidden magic. She's dangerous." "She defended herself from your assault," Kale snarled. "There's a difference." "Silence!" Moira's command cut through the rising voices. "We will hear testimony, then we will decide." She turned her ancient eyes on Alara. "Girl, step forward." Alara's legs felt like water, but she forced herself to walk to the center of the circle, to stand alone under the weight of all those staring eyes. "Show us," Moira commanded. "Show us this power you possess." I don't. Show us, or we will assume you cannot control it, that you are, indeed, too dangerous to let live." Fear spiked through Alara's chest. She looked back at Kale, who nodded encouragement, but she could see the tension in every line of his body. She closed her eyes, reached for that place inside where the power lived. The silver mark on her shoulder burned hot as she called the flame to her hands. Silver light bloomed in her palms, beautiful and ethereal, casting the entire clearing in moon-like radiance. The crowd gasped. "More," Moira demanded. "Show us your true form." Alara's hands trembled. "I've only shifted a few times. I'm still learning to. If you cannot control it, you are a threat. Shift. Now." The command in the elder's voice was undeniable. Alara felt the power surge in response, felt her body beginning to change. But this time was different. This time she was afraid, performing under pressure, and the power fed on that fear, growing stronger, wilder. The shift came fast and violent. One moment she was human, the next she was the massive silver wolf, but the power didn't stop there. It kept building, kept growing, silver flames erupting from her fur, her eyes blazing so bright several wolves had to look away. Too much. It was too much. "Control it," Kale's voice urged through the bond. "Pull it back. but she couldn't. The fear had triggered something, and now the power had its own momentum. The ground beneath her paws began to crack, silver light bleeding up through the earth. The trees around the clearing started to shake, their leaves falling like snow. "You see?" someone shouted. "She can't control it. She'll destroy us all." "Put her down, before it's too late. She's a weapon, an abomination." Their voices crashed over her like waves, feeding her panic, making the power spiral further out of control. She could feel it building towards something catastrophic, could feel the destruction hovering just at the edge of her consciousness. "Alara, listen to my voice." Kyle was suddenly there, standing in front of her massive wolf form, his hands on either side of her face, fearless even as silver flames licked at his skin. "You are not a weapon. You are not destruction. You are mine, and I will not let you fall." His words were an anchor. Slowly, painfully, Alara pulled the power back, felt herself shrinking, the flames dying, her form shifting back to human. She collapsed in Kyle's arms, shaking and exhausted, her skin still glowing faintly with residual power. The silence in the clearing was deafening. Then Moira spoke, and her words shattered everything. "The Council has seen enough. This girl is indeed powerful, but she cannot control that power. She is a danger to every wolf here." The Elder's eyes were hard, pitiless. "We hereby decree that she must be bound, her power sealed until such time as she can prove she will not use it to harm others." "No." Kale's voice was deadly quiet. "You will not touch her. It is not your decision, Stormborn." Moira gestured, and 6 wolves stepped forward. Council enforcers, each wearing silver bands around their wrists. Binding magic, ancient magic designed to suppress a wolf's power. "The binding will not harm her. It will simply contain her until—" "I said no." Kale stood, pulling Alara behind him, his body radiating lethal intent. "She is my mate. Under ancient law, you cannot bind her without my consent, and I will never consent." "Then you force our hand." Moira's expression didn't change. "If you will not allow the binding, then we must exile her permanently. Remove her from all pact territories. Send her beyond the borders where her power cannot threaten us." "You're condemning her to death," Kale snarled. "Beyond the borders is wilderness, shadow beast territory. She wouldn't survive a week." Then perhaps a new voice spoke up, cold, calculating, familiar. "She shouldn't survive at all." Ilara's blood turned to ice. Alpha Blackwood stepped into the circle, and beside him was someone Ilara had never expected to see. Elder Marin, the woman from Shadowpine, the one who had cut her, who had whispered for her to run. "Elder Marin," Moira acknowledged. "You have testimony?" "I do." The old woman's face was grave as she looked at Ilara. "I am sorry, child, truly, but I cannot stay silent any longer." "Marin, don't," Ilara whispered. But the elder continued, her voice carrying across the clearing. "The prophecy speaks of the flame-bearer, yes, but it also speaks of a choice. She who bears the silver flame must choose salvation or the world in flame. I have studied the ancient texts for decades, and I believe the prophecy is a warning, not a promise." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd. "The flame-bearer's power," Marin continued, "is meant to stop the shadow. But if she cannot control it, if she lets it consume her, that same power will destroy everything. The prophecy doesn't guarantee she'll save us. It warns that she might damn us instead." "That's not true," Kale growled. "You're twisting the words to justify your fear." "Am I?" Marin's eyes were sad. "Or am I the only one brave enough to see the truth? This girl has been rejected her entire life. She's angry, hurt, full of rage at the world that cast her aside, and now she has the power to burn that world down. How long before she decides we all deserve it? I would never, Alara started, but Marin cut her off. You already almost did. Just now. We all felt it. The power building toward destruction. If Alpha Stormborn hadn't stopped you, this entire clearing would be ash. The truth of those words hung heavy in the air. The Council's decree stands, Moira announced. The girl must be bound or she must be exiled. Those are the only options. There's a third option. Kale's voice was soft, dangerous. You try to bind her, and I stop you, by force if necessary. The clearing erupted into chaos. Alphas shouting, wolves taking sides, some siding with Kale, others with the Council. The fragile peace that had held their world together for decades was fracturing before their eyes, and Alara stood in the center of it all, watching everything fall apart. This is my fault, she thought. I'm destroying them just by existing. That's when she felt it, the pull. The voice that lived in her head suddenly growing louder, more insistent. There is another way, it whispered, a way to prove your worth, but you must be willing to face what lies beneath. The shadow, Alara breathed, understanding flooding through her. It's waking. That's why my power manifested now. That's why the prophecy is activating. The seal is breaking. What? Coyle turned to her, his eyes wide. The temple showed me visions, darkness rising, the enemy returning. That's what the prophecy is really about. Alara's voice grew stronger as certainty filled her. You're all arguing about whether I'm dangerous while the real threat is waking up beneath your feet. And when it breaks free, when the shadow rises, you'll need me. You'll need the flame bearer. Bound or not, angry or not, I'm the only chance you have. Silence fell across the clearing. She speaks truth, a voice said from the edge of the circle. An ancient wolf, older even than Moira, stepped forward. I have felt it too, the tremors in the earth. The darkness gathering in the deep places. The seal our ancestors died to create. It is failing. Then what do you suggest? Moira asked, her voice tight. A test, the ancient wolf said. Send her to the Shadowlands, to the place where the seal was first created. If she can strengthen it, prove she can control her power for good, then we will accept her, accept the prophecy. But if she fails, the shadow breaks free and we all die anyway, Kale finished bitterly. Yes, the ancient wolf's eyes were grave, but at least we will have tried. At least we will know. Alara felt Kyle's hand find hers, felt his desperate grip, felt his mind screaming through the bond. Don't agree to this. We'll run. We'll find another way. But she knew there was no other way. This was her choice, her moment, salvation or destruction. I'll do it, she said clearly. I'll go to the Shadowlands. I'll face the seal, and I'll prove to all of you that I'm not your enemy. Ilara, no. Kyle started, but she squeezed his hand, silencing him. You leave at dawn, Moira declared. You will have 7 days to reach the seal and prove your worth. If you succeed, you will be welcomed as the flame bearer. If you fail... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Chapter 8. The Shadowlands earned their name. 6 days of traveling through terrain that seemed designed to break her spirit. 6 days of Kyle at her side, refusing to leave her despite the Council's decree that she face this alone. 6 days of watching the world around them grow darker, colder, more hostile with every mile. The trees here were twisted things, their branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal hands. The ground was ash and stone, nothing living, nothing green. Even the air tasted wrong, thick with ancient malice and the promise of death. We're close, Coyle said, his voice tight. He'd barely spoken since they left the sacred grove, his fury at the council, at their betrayal, radiating through the bond like heat from a forge. Ilara could feel it too, the pull, the seal calling to her power, recognizing what she was. They crested a ridge, And there it was, the chasm of souls, a massive crack in the earth so deep and dark that even her enhanced vision couldn't see the bottom. And at its center, suspended over the void by chains of pure silver light, was the seal. It looked like a massive stone disc, covered in the same symbols she'd seen in Kyle's temple. But where those symbols had glowed with clean silver radiance, these were flickering, failing. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, and through those cracks, darkness bled like poison. And from the darkness came voices, thousands of them, millions, screaming, pleading, promising power and destruction in equal measure. Let us out. Free us. We can give you everything you've ever wanted, revenge on those who hurt you, power to burn them all. Ilara's hand started to glow, responding to the seal's call. The mark on her shoulder burned so hot she gasped, dropping to her knees. "Ilara!" Kyle was beside her instantly, his hands on her shoulders. "Don't listen to them. Don't let them in your head." "They're so loud," she gasped. "How do I—" A tremor shook the ground. The seal flickered, and one of the chains snapped. The disc tilted, and the screaming from the void grew deafening. "It's failing faster than we thought," Kale said, his face pale. "If another chain breaks before you reinforce it—" "I know." Ilara forced herself to her feet, her whole body shaking with the effort of staying conscious under the assault of voices. "I have to do this now." She started toward the edge of the chasm, but Kyle grabbed her arm. "Wait, there's something I need to tell you, something the council didn't say." "What?" His golden eyes were anguished. "Reinforcing the seal requires sacrifice. The original wolves who created it, they gave their lives. Their power, their souls, everything. That's what's been holding the shadow all these years, the life force of our ancestors." Ilara's blood went cold. "You're saying I have to die?" "I'm saying they sent you here, expecting you to die, expecting you to either fail and be consumed by the shadow or succeed and sacrifice yourself to repair the seal. Either way, you're gone. Either way, they don't have to face what you represent." Rage flooded through her, hot and pure and crystallizing into something sharp and dangerous. They'd sent her here to die. Elder Marin, Moira, all of them. They'd looked her in the eye and condemned her to death, dressed it up as a test, as a chance to prove herself. But it had always been execution. "I'm not going to die here," Ilara said, her voice hard. "I'm not going to be their sacrifice." "Then we leave. Now. We run. And we don't look back." She wanted to. Gods, she wanted to run so badly. But as another tremor shook the ground, as another chain groaned under the strain, Ilara knew the truth. If she ran, if she let the seal break, the shadow would consume everything, every pack, every wolf, every innocent life. The world would burn, including Kale. "I can't let it break," she whispered, "but I'm not dying either. There has to be another way." "There is," the voice in her head said, not the dark voices from the void, the other voice. The ancient one that had been with her since the mark appeared. "But you must trust yourself, trust your power, trust that you are more than they ever believed." "Tell me," Ilara said aloud. Kale's eyes widened. "The voice? It's talking to you now?" "It's always talked to me. I just never listened." Ilara closed her eyes, sinking into that place where the power lived. "What do I have to do? The seal was created with death. But you are life. You are the silver flame, creation and destruction in balance. You do not have to die to repair it. You have to burn. I don't understand. You will. When the moment comes, let go. Let the power consume you. But do not fear the burning. On the other side of the fire, you will find what you were always meant to be." Another chain snapped. The seal tilted further, the cracks widening. Darkness poured out like smoke, taking shape. shadow beasts with red eyes and claws made of nightmare crawling up from the void. "Out of time," Kyle growled, shifting into his massive black wolf form. "Whatever you're going to do it now." Elara ran to the edge of the chasm. The moment her feet touched the boundary, silver light exploded from her body. The mark on her shoulder blazed like a star, and she felt the shift beginning, but different this time. Bigger, more complete. She didn't fight it, didn't try to control it, she let go. The power roared through her like a wildfire, consuming everything she'd been, remaking her into something new. Her shift wasn't just into the silver wolf anymore. It was beyond that, transcendent. Silver flames erupted from her skin as she shifted, but instead of fur, she was wrapped in living light. Her form grew massive, twice the size of any wolf, made of pure, radiant energy and ancient magic. Wings unfurled from her back, not feathered, but composed of silver fire that lit up the entire Shadowlands like a second sun. She was the flame bearer, fully awakened, fully transformed, and she was magnificent. The shadow beasts shrieked and recoiled from her light. The darkness bleeding from the seal hissed and retreated like water from flame. "Now," the voice commanded, "give them your fire, but not your life. Give them renewal. Give them hope. Show them that creation is stronger than destruction." Elara threw back her head and howled. The sound was like nothing ever heard in the mortal world, layered with power and prophecy and the voices of all the ancestors who had come before. Silver light poured from her in waves, cascading down into the chasm, wrapping around the failing seal. But instead of her life force draining away, she felt herself drawing on something else. The bond, the connection to Kyle, to the earth itself. To every wolf who'd ever looked at the moon and felt the pull of something greater than themselves, she was a conduit, not a sacrifice. The seal began to heal, the cracks sealing shut, the silver chains reforging themselves, stronger than before. The symbols blazed with renewed light, and the darkness retreated, screaming its fury as it was forced back into the depths. But the shadow wasn't done. One massive shape began rising from the void, something ancient and terrible, the source of all the darkness, the entity their ancestors had died to imprison. It had no true form, just writhing shadows and red eyes and malice given shape. And it spoke, its voice like the death of stars. "Flame bearer, you cannot hold me forever. I will rise, and when I do, I will devour everything you love." Elara looked down at the shadow entity and smiled, a fierce, feral smile that showed teeth made of light. "Then I'll be waiting," she said, her voice resonating with power. "And this time you'll face a flame bearer who isn't afraid to burn." She poured everything into one final surge of power. The seal blazed so bright it turned night into day, and the shadow screamed as it was forced back down, chains of silver light wrapping around it, binding it deeper than before. When it was done, when the seal was whole and strong and glowing with renewed power, Elara felt the transformation begin to recede. Her wings faded, her form shrank. She shifted back to her wolf form, then to human, collapsing on the edge of the chasm. But she was alive. Exhausted, drained, but alive. Kale was there instantly, shifting back to human, gathering her into his arms. "You did it," he breathed, his voice rough with emotion. "You actually did it." "I'm not their sacrifice," Elara managed to say, a weak smile on her lips. "I'm nobody's sacrifice." "No," Kale agreed, holding her close. "You're the flame bearer, and you just saved the world." They made it back to the sacred grove on the 7th day, just as the sun was setting. The council was gathered, along with representatives from every pack, waiting, expecting to hear news of Elara's death, expecting confirmation that their problem had been solved. Instead, they got Elara walking into the clearing on her own 2 feet, Kale at her side, both of them battered and exhausted, but very much alive. The shock on their faces would have been comical if Alara wasn't so angry. "The seal is repaired," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent clearing. "Stronger than it was before. The shadow is contained. I fulfilled your test." Moira stepped forward, her ancient face unreadable. "The seal? How? The ritual required—" "Sacrifice, I know." Alara's eyes blazed silver. "You sent me there expecting me to die, hoping I would die. Whether I failed or succeeded, you'd be rid of the problem. That's not—" "Don't lie to me, Elder." The temperature dropped, frost forming on the ground at Alara's feet. "I can hear your heartbeat. I can taste your fear. You wanted me gone. You all did." She turned slowly, looking at each face in the crowd. Alpha Blackwood wouldn't meet her eyes. Bobby had gone pale. Even Elder Marin looked away in shame. "But I'm not gone," Alara continued, her voice soft and deadly. "I'm right here, more powerful than before, fully awakened. And you know what I learned down there in the Shadowlands, facing the darkness you were all too afraid to face yourselves? Silence. I learned that I don't need your acceptance, don't need your approval or your fear or your tests. I am the flame bearer, the prophecy made flesh. And whether you like it or not, whether you fear me or worship me or hate me, I am here to stay." Silver light flickered around her hands, not threatening, just present, a reminder of what she could do if she chose. "So here's what's going to happen," Alara said. "You're going to go back to your packs, your councils, your comfortable lives, and you're going to remember that when the real threat comes, because it will come, the shadow will rise again. I'll be the one standing between you and annihilation. Not because I owe you anything, but because it's the right thing to do." She stepped closer to Moira, her silver eyes meeting the Elder's ancient ones. "I am not your weapon. I am not your sacrifice. I am not your destruction." Her voice dropped to something intimate, final. "I am your future, and you will learn to live with that." Then she turned and walked away, Kale falling into step beside her, leaving the council and the alphas and all their judgment behind. "That was incredible," Kale murmured, pride radiating through the bond. "That was necessary," Alara corrected, but she was smiling. "I'm done being afraid of them, done being small." "What now?" She looked up at him. This powerful Alpha King who'd chosen her, who'd stood by her, who'd believed in her when no one else did. "Now?" She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Now we go home, and we prepare, because the shadow will rise again, and when it does—" Her eyes blazed silver in the darkness. "I'll be ready." Chapter 9. The weeks that followed the sacred grove felt like living in the eye of a storm. Word spread fast. The Omega who couldn't shift had become the flame bearer. The girl they'd cast aside had saved them all. And now she lived in the Forbidden Peaks with the exiled Alpha King, growing stronger every day. Some packs sent emissaries with gifts and apologies. Others sent threats. Most just watched and waited, trying to decide if Alara was their salvation or their doom. She didn't care anymore what they thought. For the first time in her life, Alara was free. Free to be powerful without apologizing for it. Free to train without shame. Free to stand beside Kyle as his equal, not his burden. And the bond between them had deepened into something that went beyond prophecy or destiny. It was choice now. Every morning they chose each other. Every night they fell asleep wrapped around each other, their hearts beating in sync. "You're thinking too loud," Kale murmured against her hair. They were lying on the furs in his chamber, their chamber now, watching the fire burn low. Outside, winter had claimed the mountains, covering everything in pristine white snow that sparkled under the moonlight. "I'm thinking about how different everything is," Alara said softly. "A month ago, I was nobody, invisible, running for my life through a storm. And now Now you're the most powerful wolf in 1,000 years, mated to a devastatingly handsome alpha king, and living in a palace carved into a mountain." His tone was teasing, but his arms tightened around her. "Must be hard." She laughed, elbowing him gently. "Devastatingly handsome. Really? You're not going to argue with me?" Alara turned in his arms, looking up at his face in the firelight. Those golden eyes that had once intimidated her now felt like home. "No," she said softly. "I'm not going to argue with you." His expression shifted, growing serious. "What are you thinking, really?" "I'm thinking—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "I'm thinking about the prophecy, about the choice I'm supposed to make. Salvation or destruction. The shadow promised it would rise again, and when it does, when I have to face it with everything I am—" "You're afraid you'll choose wrong," Kale finished quietly. "I'm afraid I won't be enough." The confession came out broken. What if I fail next time? What if the power consumes me like Elder Marin said it would? What if I become the very thing they fear? Kyle cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Listen to me. You have already made your choice. Every day since you woke up in my bed, every moment you chose to stay instead of run, every time you've used your power to protect instead of destroy. That's your choice. You are not the destruction, Alara." "You're the hope." "How do you know?" "Because I know you." His voice was fierce. "I know the girl who used to hide in trees and dream of mattering. I know the woman who faced her greatest fear in the Shadowlands and refused to be a sacrifice. I know my mate who could have burned the council to ash for what they did to her, but chose mercy instead." He leaned his forehead against hers. "The prophecy doesn't define you. You define it. And whatever comes, whatever darkness rises, we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore." The words settled into her chest like an anchor. He was right. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. "I love you," Alara whispered. The first time she'd said it aloud, though it had lived in her heart for weeks now. Kale's breath caught. "Say it again. I love you, Kale Stormborn. My mate, my king, my—" He kissed her before she could finish, pouring everything he felt through the bond, devotion and desire and a love so deep it made her chest ache. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were blazing gold. "I love you," he said hoarsely, "my flame bearer, my heart, my everything, and I will spend eternity proving to you that you made the right choice by staying." They made love that night by the fire, slow and reverent, the bond between them singing with completion. And afterward, wrapped in furs and each other, Alara felt something settle in her soul. This was where she belonged, not because prophecy said so, but because she'd chosen it. But peace, as Alara was learning, never lasted long. She woke before dawn to find Coil already up, standing at the window, his body tense with the stillness that meant he was listening to something far away. "What is it?" she asked, pulling on her robe. "Scouts just reported in." His voice was grim. "The shadow isn't waiting. It's already moving." Alara's blood went cold. "That's impossible. The seal was repaired. It should hold for years, maybe decades." "Should. But you made it stronger, which means the shadow knows you're a real threat now. It's not going to wait for you to get stronger. It's going to strike while you're still learning. Still vulnerable." He turned to face her, and the fear in his eyes made her stomach drop. "It sent its servants, shadow beasts, dozens of them, maybe more. They've already attacked 3 packs along the southern border. Casualties? Too many." His jaw clenched. "And the attacks are coordinated, strategic. They're not just killing randomly, they're destroying pack structures, targeting alphas, creating chaos. Testing us," Alara realized. "Testing whether the packs will unite or fall apart under pressure." and they're falling apart. Kale's hands fisted at his sides. Already I'm hearing reports of packs blaming each other, old feuds reigniting. The council is paralyzed, too busy arguing about jurisdiction to actually do anything useful. Elara moved to stand beside him, looking out at the mountains painted pink and gold by the rising sun. What do we do? We? Kale looked at her. Elara, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She met his eyes, her jaw set. This is what the prophecy meant. This is why I awakened now. The shadow is rising, and the flame bearer is the only one who can stop it. So we fight. Pride and anguish warred across his face. You're not ready. You've only been training for a few weeks. Your power is still unstable. If you push too hard, then I'll burn. Elara took his hand. But I'll burn fighting for something that matters, for wolves who don't deserve to die because they're too afraid to stand together, for the future we're supposed to have, for us. Kale pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I can't lose you. Not after finally finding you. You won't. She pulled back, looking up at him with fierce determination. Because I'm done being afraid, done doubting myself. The shadow wants a war, then we'll give it one. But on our terms. What are you thinking? A plan was forming in her mind. Dangerous, maybe impossible, but it was the only way. The packs are fractured because they don't trust each other, don't trust the prophecy, don't trust me. Elara's eyes blazed silver. So I'm going to give them a reason to trust. I'm going to go to each pack under attack, and I'm going to fight the shadow beasts myself. Show them what the flame bearer can do. Show them that I'm not their enemy, I'm their only hope. That's suicide. You'll be exhausted, vulnerable, spread too thin. Maybe. She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Or maybe it's exactly what the prophecy meant. Maybe this is my choice. Stand and fight or watch the world burn. Kale stared at her for a long moment, emotions flickering across his face too fast to name. Finally, he sighed. If you're doing this, I'm coming with you. Every step, every battle. I wouldn't have it any other way. They left within the hour, racing toward the first pack under attack. And as they ran through the snow-covered forest, Elara felt the weight of her choice settling over her shoulders like a mantle. This was it, the moment that would define everything. Would she be the savior the prophecy promised? Or would she become the flame that consumed the world? She didn't know, but she was done running from the question. So here we are, at the edge of everything. Elara, the girl who was told she was broken, is about to walk into a war. The flame bearer, who was meant to save them all, is choosing to fight even though she might fail, even though the power might consume her, even though the very wolves she's trying to save still fear her. Would you make that choice? Would you stand up for people who cast you aside? Would you fight for a world that never wanted you? Or would you let it all burn? That's the question, isn't it? That's what makes Elara's story so compelling. She's not a perfect hero. She's just a girl who decided that being powerful didn't mean being cruel, that having the ability to destroy everything didn't mean she had to. She chose salvation, over and over again. But will it be enough? If this story has grabbed hold of something inside you, if you've felt Elara's pain and celebrated her victories, if you've fallen for Kale's fierce devotion, if you've been rooting for the broken Omega to become the flame bearer she was always meant to be, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to our channel, because this journey isn't over yet. The shadow is rising. The final battle is coming, and you need to be here for what happens next. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. Leave a comment telling me, would you choose to save a world that rejected you? Or would you choose the flame? Because Elara's about to make her final choice, and you won't want to miss it. Chapter 10. The southern border was painted in blood and shadow. Alara and Kale arrived to find the Riverstone Pack's territory in chaos. Bodies littered the ground, wolves who hadn't been fast enough, strong enough, lucky enough. The pack house was burning, flames reaching toward the sky like desperate prayers. And everywhere, the shadow beasts prowled. They were worse than Alara remembered from the visions. Creatures made of living darkness, with red eyes that burned like coals and claws that could tear through flesh and bone like paper. They moved wrong, jerking and twitching like marionettes controlled by something mad. There! Kale pointed to a group of wolves backed against the tree line, shadow beasts circling them like predators playing with their food. We need to... But Alara was already moving. She shifted mid-run, her body exploding into that massive silver wolf form, wings of flame unfurling from her back. The light she emanated pushed back the unnatural darkness, and the shadow beasts shrieked in response. "Get away from them," her voice thundered telepathically, carrying the weight of prophecy and power. She crashed into the nearest shadow beast like a comet, silver fire erupting from her jaws as she tore it apart. The creature dissolved into smoke and screaming, its essence burning away under her light. Two more lunged at her from the sides. She spun, her wings slashing out like blades of flame, cutting through them with surgical precision. Behind her, Kyle was fighting in his massive black wolf form, keeping the beasts from flanking her, working in perfect synchronization through the bond. They were devastating together, death and light, destruction and hope. The Alpha King and the Flame Bearer fighting as one. Within minutes, the immediate threat was neutralized. The shadow beasts that weren't destroyed fled back into the darkness, their red eyes watching from the tree line with malevolent intelligence. Alara shifted back to human, breathing hard, her skin still glowing with residual power. The surviving Riverstone wolves stared at her with expressions she was getting used to. Fear mixed with awe, mixed with desperate hope. "You're her," one of them whispered. "The Flame Bearer. You're real." "I'm real." Alara's voice was steady despite her exhaustion. "And I'm here to help. Where's your Alpha?" They led her to a makeshift medical tent where Alpha Riverstone lay bleeding from a dozen wounds, his mate desperately trying to heal him with what little magic she possessed. "Let me," Alara said softly, kneeling beside them. The Luna looked up, her eyes red from crying. "I don't know if..." "Trust me." Alara placed her glowing hands on the Alpha's chest. The silver light poured from her palms, not burning but healing, knitting flesh and bone back together with the same power that had sealed the shadow. It was exhausting, draining, but she pushed through until the Alpha's breathing steadied, his wounds closed. "Thank you," the Luna sobbed. "Thank you." They stayed long enough to ensure the pack was secure, to help them reinforce their borders with wards of silver light that would repel the shadow beasts. And then they moved on to the next pack under attack, and the next, and the next. 7 days, 7 days of fighting, healing, traveling without rest. 7 days of Alara pushing her power to its limits and beyond. 7 days of watching wolves who'd once feared her start to believe. Word spread faster than wildfire. The Flame Bearer was real. She was fighting for them, saving them. And slowly, impossibly, the fractured packs began to unite behind her. Alphas who'd spent decades feuding put aside their differences. Councils who'd argued over jurisdiction started coordinating defenses. Wolves who'd been ready to tear each other apart found themselves fighting side by side against a common enemy, and at the center of it all was Alara, burning brighter with each battle, each choice, each moment she chose to be their salvation instead of their destruction. But the shadow was learning too. On the 8th day, they walked into a trap. The Blackwood pack, Bobby's pack, the ones who'd tried to execute her, had sent a desperate plea for help. Shadow beasts were overrunning their territory, and they were losing badly. Alara had wanted to ignore it. Let them face the consequences of their cruelty. But Kyle had looked at her with those golden eyes and said quietly, "This is the choice, isn't it? Save even the ones who don't deserve it, or become what they feared." So they went, and found the entire pack gathered in their central square, surrounded by shadow beasts that weren't attacking, just waiting. In the center stood a figure made of pure darkness, humanoid but wrong, its edges constantly shifting, its eyes burning red like the heart of a dying star, the shadow itself, or at least an avatar of it. "Flame-bearer," it said, and its voice was like the death of worlds. "Finally, we meet face to face." Alara shifted to her full form, wings blazing. "You should have stayed sealed." "Should have, but you made a mistake, little wolf. You made the seal stronger, yes, but in doing so, you created a connection between yourself and the darkness, a doorway that goes both ways." The shadow laughed, and the sound made reality itself shudder. "Every time you use your power, you open that door a little wider. Every time you burn, I grow stronger. We are bound now, you and I, two sides of the same flame." Horror washed through her. "That's not possible." "Isn't it? Light cannot exist without darkness, creation without destruction. The prophecy spoke true. You are salvation, but you are also the world in flame. Both possibilities exist in you, waiting for your final choice." The shadow gestured, and the beasts surged forward, not toward Alara, but toward the wolves. Toward Bobby, toward Alpha Blackwood, toward every wolf who'd ever hurt her. "So choose now, Flame-bearer. Save them and feed me your power, or let them die and preserve yourself for the real battle to come. Either way." The shadow smiled with too many teeth. "I win." Time seemed to slow. Alara could feel Kyle beside her, could feel him ready to fight, ready to die protecting her, could feel the terrified wolves behind her, the ones who'd called her abomination and tried to execute her. She could let them die, save her strength, keep the door between her and the shadow closed, or she could burn, the choice that defined everything. What do you choose? The ancient voice in her head whispered, "Salvation or flame?" Alara looked at Bobby's terrified face, thought about the girl she'd been, hiding in trees, dreaming of mattering, thought about the woman she'd become, powerful and feared and finally free. And she realized something. The prophecy had been wrong all along. It wasn't one choice. It was every choice, every moment, every decision to be better than the darkness inside her. "I choose both," she said quietly, and she let the power explode. Silver flame erupted from her in a wave that lit up the entire territory like a second sun. It consumed the shadow beasts, burned them away to nothing. But it didn't stop there. She poured everything into it, all her pain, all her rage, all her hope and love and desperate determination to be more than what they'd called her. The shadow avatar screamed as her light crashed into it, forcing it back, burning away its form until only its voice remained. "This isn't over, Flame-bearer. The seal will break. I will rise. And when I do, I'll be waiting," Alara said, her voice resonating with absolute certainty. "And I won't be alone." The shadow's presence shattered, dissolving into smoke and echoes. Silence fell across the territory. Alara stood in the center of the square, her wings slowly fading, her power receding. She should have been exhausted, should have been drained. Instead, she felt stronger than ever, because she'd made her choice, and it hadn't destroyed her. She turned to face the Blackwood wolves, meeting Bobby's eyes directly. "I am the Flame-bearer, the one from prophecy, and I just saved your lives, not because you deserved it, not because you earned it, but because that's who I choose to be." She looked around at all of them. The wolves who'd feared her, rejected her, tried to kill her. The shadow is coming. The real battle hasn't even begun yet. And when it does, you'll have a choice, too. Stand with me, fight beside me, or get out of my way, but never, ever doubt what I am again." Then she shifted back to human, swaying with exhaustion that finally hit her like a freight train. Kale was there immediately, catching her, holding her up. "Easy, love. I've got you." "Did we win?" she murmured against his chest. "You won." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "My magnificent, impossible mate. You won." They walked away from the Blackwood territory as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Behind them, Alara could hear the murmurs, could feel the shift in how they looked at her, not with fear anymore, with respect, with belief. "The shadow was right about one thing," she said quietly. "This isn't over. The seal will break eventually, and when it does, Kale interrupted, pulling her closer. "You'll be ready. We'll be ready. The packs are uniting, your power is growing, and most importantly—" He cupped her face, his golden eyes intense. "You know who you are now. Not Omega, not abomination, not weapon. Just Alara, the flame bearer who chose salvation over destruction. The woman who saved the world not because prophecy demanded it, but because her heart couldn't do anything else." She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt through the bond, love and gratitude, and the fierce joy of being seen, of being chosen, of being enough. When they pulled apart, the ground beneath their feet trembled, just slightly, just enough to notice. They both froze. In the distance, from somewhere deep beneath the earth, a voice echoed, ancient and patient and terrible. "She is not the only one." Kale's arms tightened around her. "What does that mean?" Alara's eyes blazed silver as she stared toward the horizon, toward the Shadowlands where the seal waited. "It means the shadow has a plan. It means there's more to the prophecy than we know. And—" she looked up at him, fierce and determined and unafraid. "And we're going to face it together, whatever comes, whatever rises. We'll be ready." Another tremor shook the ground. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, not in fear, but in challenge, in readiness. The final battle was coming. But for now, the flame-bearer walked toward home, her alpha king at her side, her power burning steady and true. And in the darkness beneath the earth, the shadow waited, patient, hungry, because the prophecy hadn't been fulfilled yet, not completely. The true alpha, the one the shadow had been waiting for, hadn't risen. Yet. The journey continues. The war has just begun, and nothing will ever be the same. The end. For now, thank you for joining Alara's journey on this channel. Her story isn't over. The shadow is still waiting, and secrets yet untold will change everything. Subscribe and stay with us, because the Flame Bearer's greatest battle is still to come.